Welcome to Episode 3. Humans are obsessed with this time thing. They make these weird little ticking noises and then get all stressed if they're late for something. We just kind of exist, you know? One good nap blends right into the next. But sometimes things shift. The house smells different. The leash appears for walkies. And sometimes the small humans get bigger. It's all a bit confusing, honestly. Luckily, I have my friends Tokyo and Nipsey to help me process it all. Tokyo and Nipsey, take it away.
Now, how do dogs experience time?
Right. It's fascinating.
You see them, don't you, waiting by the door, like exactly when you usually get home.
Yeah.
Or they just seem to know dinner's coming up.
Mm-hmm. It definitely feels like they've got some kind of internal clock.
It does. But how does that actually work? They don't have clocks or calendars or, a concept of more. We've got this great stack of sources here, research papers, articles. Let's try and unpack this canine mystery.
Yeah, it's one of those questions, seems simple, but the answer really shows a completely different way of navigating the world, pulling out the key insights from these sources, getting into that unique temporal world dogs live in.
Okay.
And the research, well, it suggests that while they share some basic biological timing stuff with us, their sense of time isn't built on abstract ideas. It's really grounded in memory, incredibly sharp senses, and rhythm, all shaped by evolution and, importantly, living alongside us.
So our mission here is to explore the mechanisms, right? What's actually going on, from the internal clocks we kind of share to senses that are way, way sharper than ours, to really try and understand what it feels like to live in dog time.
Exactly. And the most fundamental place to start has to be the biology. Dogs, just like us, have internal 24-hour circadian rhythms.
The basic internal pacemaker.
Right.
And this is more than just knowing when to wake up and nudge you for breakfast, isn't it? Wired in deep.
It absolutely is. These are endogenous biological clocks deep in the brain, controlling all sorts of daily patterns, sleep, activity, metabolism, hormone release. It's a fundamental biological thing for loads of species.
But the way they structure their day around this clock,
yeah,
it looks pretty different from how we do it.
Oh, significantly different. Yeah, we tend to sleep in one big chunk that's monophasic sleep. Dogs, they have a polyphasic sleep. Meaning they sleep in lots of shorter bursts, scattered throughout the day and night. They average about maybe 10 hours total sleep in 24 hours, but it's all broken up.
Yeah.
During a typical night, they might actually have like 24 separate little sleep-wake episodes.
Wow, 24?
Yeah, and each sleep cycle is shorter too, maybe around 83 minutes, while ours are longer, more like 90 to 120 minutes.
So definitely not one long snooze. And I guess their active periods are broken up too.
They are, yeah. Research on pet dogs shows these sort of bimodal activity peaks. Generally, they're most active first thing, maybe around 7 a.m. Then there's a real dip around noon, and then another peak later on, often around 7 p.m.
Okay, that makes sense. But what I find really fascinating is how adaptable these biological rhythms seem to be, especially for dogs living with people.
That could be one of the really key coevolutionary things. I mean, natural light cycles definitely play a role, sure, but dogs are amazing at syncing up their internal clocks. The technical term is entraining to our schedules. There's this great study actually on sled dogs. It showed they adjusted their activity patterns to match their handler's new schedule after daylight saving time kicked in about 1 day.
1 day. Seriously, it takes me way longer than that.
Right. It's incredibly fast. And it just highlights how finely tuned their biology might be to our way of life,
Yeah, wow. So, okay, the circadian rhythm gives them this broad, kind of flexible framework for time of day. But that doesn't quite explain how they know dinner is at 6 p.m. sharp, or that you leave for work at the exact same time every weekday. That feels more like learning.
It absolutely is learning. Dogs don't seem to operate with abstract concepts like 6 o'clock or an hour from now or tomorrow. They're not checking watches. Their ability to anticipate specific events, that relies heavily on memory.
Okay, let's unpack that memory piece then. What's the main tool they're using for learning routines?
Well, their primary tool for this kind of temporal learning seems to be associative memory. This is where they form really strong connections between specific cues they notice in their environment and the predictable events that usually follow.
Like the sound of keys jingling means you're about to leave.
Exactly. Or putting on certain shoes means a walk is coming, or the specific rattle of the food bag means dinner time.
And over time, they build up this whole reliable schedule in their heads based on these environmental cues and the things that consistently happen after them.
Precisely. Repetition is super important here. And also the emotional significance of the event, like, the excitement for a walk or for food that really cements those associations. Some sources even say they can link a behavior with a consequence incredibly quickly, maybe within just 4 seconds or so.
4 seconds, wow. Okay, so associative memory explains the routine stuff, right, the predictable daily grind. But here's where it gets, well, really interesting based on the research. This idea that dogs might have something called episodic-like memory.
Ah, yes. This is a much deeper, more complex idea than just simple association. Episodic memory, in humans anyway, is about recalling the specific details of unique past personal experiences. The what, where, and when of a particular event, even if you weren't consciously trying to memorize it at the time.
Like remembering that specific Tuesday, you accidentally dropped a whole sausage on the kitchen floor.
Exactly like that. And the do-as-I-did studies are really compelling evidence for this in dogs.
Tell me about those.
So researchers would show a dog in action, like touching an object with their paw. Then after an unexpected delay, could be minutes, could be up to an hour, they'd give the command, do it. And the dogs could often imitate the specific action they'd seen the human do earlier, which suggests they weren't just responding to the command, but recalling their own perception of that specific action in that context, even though they weren't told beforehand to remember it.
So it wasn't just, oh, do it means do something, but more like, oh, do it means do that specific thing I saw you do a while ago.
That seems to be the implication, yes. But, and this is a really crucial but, it's called episodic-like memory for a reason.
Okay, why like?
Because while they seem to recall the factual bits, the what, where, maybe the sequence, it's incredibly hard, maybe impossible, to prove they have the human element of self-aware, subjective re-experiencing. What psychologists call autonoetic consciousness.
Autonoetic consciousness.
Meaning that feeling of mentally traveling back in time, consciously projecting yourself into the past or imagining yourself in a future scenario, that self-aware reliving it in your mind. Some researchers are quite skeptical and argue that animals are largely stuck in time, mostly operating in the present based on learned associations and immediate needs without that kind of mental time travel.
Okay. So they've got the associative memory for the predictable routines. Maybe this episodic-like memory for remembering specific, perhaps emotionally significant one-off events, plus obviously short-term memory for immediate tasks and long-term memory for things like commands or recognizing people. That's actually a pretty powerful toolkit for predicting things based on past experience.
It really is. And it's likely the interplay between the two, the associative memory building that reliable expectation of routines, and the episodic-like memory allowing them to learn from unique, maybe important occurrences that gives them flexibility in understanding how events unfold. You could almost say their timeline might be heavily weighted by those really memorable, emotionally charged experiences.
Okay, so memory helps them anticipate based on past patterns. But what about sensing the passage of time itself right now? How do they know 10 minutes have passed since you left versus, say, 20 minutes?
Now, this is where their incredible senses come into play, and it gets really, really fascinating, especially when we start talking about smell.
The olfactory clock hypothesis. I've heard of this. It sounds almost like science fiction.
It does sound a bit wild, doesn't it? But it's a serious proposal put forward by researcher Alexandra Horowitz. Given their sense of smell is just so vastly superior to ours. I mean, we're talking potentially 300 million olfactory receptors compared to our paltry 5 or 6 million.
Yes, unbelievable.
She suggests dogs might literally be able to smell the passage of time.
Smell time. How? How would that even work?
Okay, think about the scents in your house, your personal scent, the scent of everything, it's there. But when you leave the house, the concentration of your specific scent molecules in the air, on the furniture, it doesn't just vanish instantly. It slowly, gradually decays. It dissipates over time.
Right, okay. It gets weaker.
Exactly. And the hypothesis is that a dog with that superpowered nose can perceive that gradual weakening, that fading of the scent signal.
So they learn to associate different levels of scent intensity with how long you've been gone.
That's the core idea. Through repeated experience, you leaving and coming back, a dog could learn that this particular low level of your scent usually means you've been gone for, say, 8 hours, and based on past patterns, you're probably due back soon. A stronger scent means you only just left.
Huh. There was that story about Donut the dog.
Yes. The anecdote about Donut seeming to anticipate her owner coming home from school at the same time each day. Horowitz suggests maybe Donut was tracking how much his scent had faded since he left that morning, and that reached a coming home soon level at the right time.
Wow. So smell could provide this sort of slow, continuous background timer, like a clock ticking and feeding scent molecules instead of seconds. That's incredible. And that's a totally different time scale compared to their eyesight, right? Which I understand is actually faster than ours.
It is, yeah, significantly faster in one key aspect. Humans perceive visual information smoothly up to about 50 or 60 flickers per second. That's our critical flicker fusion frequency, or CFF. Dogs have a higher CFF, somewhere around 70 to 80 hertz, or 70 to 80 flickers per second.
Which means?
What exactly?
It means they perceive more distinct visual frames per second than we do. They can see very rapid movements with much greater temporal detail. Essentially, things that might blur for us could look clearer, maybe even like slow motion to them. It also explains why older TVs with lower refresh rates often look like they're flickering to a dog, while they look like smooth motion to us. And this rapid visual processing is obviously super useful for spotting quick movements, recognizing people instantly, reacting fast to visual cues.
And sound must play a big part too, surely.
Oh, absolutely. Auditory cues are hugely important temporal markers. The specific sound of your car engine coming down the street, your footsteps on the path, the jingle of your keys, the crinkle of the treat bag.
Yeah, my dog definitely knows that sound.
Right. Even verbal cues like, "Be right back." These all become really strongly associated with specific events through learning. And while vision might be faster for initial recognition, these learned sounds are incredibly effective signals for predicting what's about to happen. So it sounds like they're pulling all this information together. This may be slow background smell clock measuring longer durations, the super fast visual processing for what's happening right now, and these specific learned sounds signaling imminent events.
That's what the sources strongly suggest, yes. They integrate information from all these different senses to build their picture of the temporal world. And because the senses operate on such different timescales, that slow scent decay versus rapid visual updates and distinct sounds, it really suggests their experience of the present moment, their now, might be maybe more intensely packed with high-fidelity sensory data than ours is.
They're richer now.
Potentially, yeah. A qualitatively different kind of temporal awareness, perfectly suited to their needs. And which sense takes priority probably depends on the context, right? Maybe smell is dominant for gauging how long you've been gone, but vision and hearing are crucial for reacting to something happening right in front of them.
Okay, so how do we actually see all these mechanisms playing out? What are the common behaviors that show us this is happening?
Well, they show up really clearly. The most obvious one is that anticipation of routine events we mentioned right at the start.
Yeah, the pre-dinner happy dance, or the way they gather by the door just before you get home.
Exactly. Those eager behaviors before meals, walks, or your return, they're driven by that potent combination. Their internal circadian rhythm saying it's about that time of day, the learned associations with specific cues, like maybe the clock striking a certain hour, which coincides with you getting home, or the sound of the garage door, and potentially those direct sensory cues, like your fading scent hitting that almost home level, or actually hearing your car turn onto the street.
And understanding this is really crucial, isn't it, when we think about difficult issues like separation-related behaviors, the anxiety, the barking, the destruction when dogs are left alone.
Hugely important, yes. SRBs are complex, definitely, but the distress often seems connected not just to the fact of being alone, but specifically to the perceived duration of the absence. The research suggests dogs really do sense how long you've been gone. And for some dogs, that awareness, especially if it feels longer than usual or expected, seems to trigger anxiety.
The COVID-19 lockdowns actually gave us some accidental insights here, didn't they?
They really did. It was like a huge natural experiment. Studies found that dogs whose alone time decreased the most during lockdowns because their humans were suddenly home all the time were actually at the highest risk of developing new separation issues when routines went back to normal with longer absences.
So it wasn't just being alone, it was the change in duration.
Exactly. It strongly implies the distress was linked to a violation of their newly adjusted expectation of how long they'd be left alone. They'd recalibrated to shorter absences during lockdown, and suddenly being left for longer felt wrong, maybe even alarming.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think the sources also mentioned something about them being better at telling the difference between shorter times than longer ones.
Yes, that aligns with a general principle in perception called Weber's law. Basically, it's easier to notice a difference between two things when they're smaller or less intense. For time, it means it might be easier for a dog to tell the difference between, say, a 5-minute wait and a 10-minute wait than between a 50-minute wait and a 55-minute wait.
Okay.
So maybe longer absences feel a bit more fuzzy to them, or perhaps they just cross a threshold, a kind of learned safe period. And let's not forget, just like for us, boredom can probably make time feel subjectively longer for a dog too.
So understanding all this isn't just, interesting trivia. It has real practical implications for helping dogs who struggle with being alone.
Absolutely. Setting predictable routines is key because it helps them build reliable temporal expectations. And that olfactory clock idea, if it's right, offers a really intriguing potential explanation for why anxiety sometimes seems to escalate the longer you're gone. If your scent fading past a certain learned threshold signals an overdue return or an abnormally long absence compared to the usual routine, for an anxious dog, that could be the trigger for real panic. It's not just being alone, it's potentially smelling that this period of being alone is going on too long.
Wow. Okay, so pulling it all together now.
Right.
How does this whole canine experience of time really stack up against our human one? What are the biggest differences that jump out from the sources?
Well, the comparison really throws the differences into sharp focus. As humans, we rely massively on abstract concepts, don't we? Hours, minutes, days marked on a calendar, planning for next week or next year.
Right. And dogs seem to rely entirely on concrete, perceptible cues, things they can actually sense.
Exactly. Those biological states like hunger or sleepiness, environmental signals like changes in light, learned patterns from routine, and that direct sensory input, the fading smell, the sound of the car, the visual scene right now. It supports the argument some researchers make that animals might be largely stuck in time, operating primarily in the present based on these immediate concrete cues.
And we humans have this self-aware mental time travel thing, that autonoetic consciousness you mentioned. We can consciously reflect on our past experiences and mentally simulate different possible futures.
Right. Dogs have that episodic memory. They can recall factual details about past events, sure, but it seems unlikely they have that kind of self-aware projection, that ability to consciously place themselves in a past or future mental scenario. Their anticipation seems tied much more to learned routines and the cues that signal them rather than abstract future planning.
And of course, we use language constantly to symbolize and reason about time. Dogs don't have that tool.
No. So, arguably, the core difference really boils down to the level of abstraction. Human time can be decontextualized, thought about separately from the here and now. Dog time seems deeply, inextricably grounded in specific contextual cues, the smell in this room right now, the sound happening just outside.
But it's crucial to say, this doesn't mean canine time is somehow lesser or simpler than ours, does it? Just fundamentally different.
Not lesser at all. In fact, their unique sensory abilities, that faster visual processing, that incredible sense of smell, could actually give them a more temporally dense, maybe more vividly perceived present moment than we often experience.
More dense? How so?
Well, their now might be absolutely packed with raw, high-resolution sensory information, those rapid visual flickers we miss, the continuous gradients of scent information, perhaps less filtered through language and abstract thought like ours often is. It's a qualitatively different but highly adaptive form of temporal awareness, perfectly tuned for their world, their specific sensory umwelt.
Umwelt, their unique sensory bubble, their perceptual world. So their now is just bursting with more sensory detail.
That's a great way to put it. It's their reality, shaped by what their amazing senses allow them to perceive, which might even include, as we discussed, the very smell of time passing.
This is all incredibly insightful. But, studying something as inherently subjective as how another creature experiences time, that must be incredibly challenging for researchers.
Oh, it's perhaps the biggest challenge in all of animal cognition, really what philosophers call the other minds problem. We have to infer their inner world, their subjective experience from their outward behavior, but we can never truly know what it feels like to be a dog smelling time fade or seeing the world flicker faster. There's a constant scientific debate about how much we can actually know about animal consciousness.
And just designing the experiments must be tricky too, right? Controlling for everything.
Yeah, significant hurdles there. Trying to isolate time perception itself from other related things like memory or attention or just simple expectation based on some subtle cue in the environment we haven't noticed. It's really hard. And we always have to be so careful not to anthropomorphize, not to just project our own human experience onto their behavior. We need methods that really try to tap into their way of sensing and being in the world.
So more dog-centric approach.
Exactly. Studies grounded in their natural behaviors and sensory strength.
But the research is moving forward. What are scientists looking at next?
Absolutely. It's a really active field. The future looks promising. We're seeing exciting developments in things like advanced neuroimaging techniques, allowing us to actually see brain activity in awake, cooperating dogs, which could potentially show us areas involved in temporal processing.
Wow.
There's also a push for more integrated sensory studies, looking at how smell, sight, and sound cues work together in their perception of time. Longitudinal studies are valuable too, tracking dogs over months or years to see how these abilities develop and how they relate to things like separation anxiety over time. And comparative cognition, comparing dogs with other species like wolves, can shed light on the evolutionary roots of these abilities. Plus, just continually refining behavioral tests to make them more ecologically valid, more relevant to a dog's real life.
And I guess specifically designing experiments to properly test that olfactory clock hypothesis must be high on the list.
Oh, definitely. It's arguably one of the most intriguing species-specific ideas out there. Actually, designing experiments to rigorously test whether dogs can use fading scent intensity as a temporal cue is a major, major area for future research. If it holds up, it really changes how we think about their connection to the flow of time.
So wrapping up, what have we really learned from digging into these sources? It seems clear dogs don't tick off seconds on a watch or plan for next Tuesday, but they absolutely possess a truly sophisticated, multi-layered sense of time.
Yeah, it's built on that foundation of their adaptable biological rhythms, definitely. Then layered with that powerful mix of associative memory for learning the daily patterns and perhaps that episodic-like memory for recalling specific important moments. And critically, it's all underpinned and informed by their incredibly acute senses, maybe even smelling time fade away and seeing the visual world with surprising temporal clarity.
And understanding this canine wealth of time, their unique temporal world, it isn't just, fascinating science. It has real concrete implications for how we live with them, how we train them, how we support their emotional well-being, and especially how we interpret and manage challenging behaviors like separation anxiety.
It really underscores that their experience of the world isn't just a simpler, watered-down version of ours. It's a distinct, rich, complex tapestry woven from these concrete environmental cues and their deep, constant sensory engagement with the world around them.
And maybe, just maybe, that brings us to a final kind of provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Yeah.
If their experience of time is so profoundly rooted in the immediate sensory details of the present moment, that fading scent, that specific sound, that rapid visual flicker, perhaps less burdened by our very human anxieties about abstract future plans or regrets about past mistakes, maybe there's something really valuable we can learn from their way of being in time. What might our now feel like if we could experience it less through the lens of the ticking clock and more through the vibrant, unfolding smells, sights, and sounds happening right here, right now?